Hi, I hope all is well with everybody. I just want to say thank you for joining me again. I wanted to have an honest and heartfelt conversation today about growth and stagnation and just where you may be, where you may not be. What happens when we sell ourselves short. This is just my take and my opinion. That does not mean it is the end all be all. It does not mean that, what I say is what you should run with, but just some sound advice as to how we, as a human, may tend to think sometimes. I know we're all different in our own ways, and I think that's one thing that's beautiful about us as human beings is that we are our own entity and we can think, believe, and feel and speak how we want. One thing that I love is when I am able to sit down and converse, whether that's with family, classmates, colleagues, anyone in the educational setting, my professors, families in the community that I'm engaging with. I get to hear a various amount of aspect and just different ideas of when it comes to growth and what people see and what they feel and initially basically what they think and how they want to move beyond the space that they're in, especially when it comes down to wanting to see long-term change. Short-term change is always the best ideal place to start, but it's that long-term change personally that I've seen the biggest difference happen. Every so often, I will draw on my own experience and bring it into the workspace, but typically, depending on the client and the subject and what's at hand, I will veer away from the topic of just my changes and what I went through to get to where I am now. But honestly, I just wanted to talk about just us as humans when we have the opportunity to grow. I don't know if you've all heard of this story about Ralph Waldorf Emerson, and he talks about the road less traveled. Many people out there, there's a road that we all have to travel, and it's called life. And I'm going to be honest, I have had a great deal of time to sit back and reflect on conversations that I've had with various adults from years, generational years with my own family on both sides, from my mother and father's sides, people that I have come in contact with in my professional setting, my work setting of the past, in general at church, just having honest conversations with classmates, again, people in the grocery store. I had an opportunity while a session was going on. A client was waiting to be seen, and I talked with a grandmother. She was a caregiver, and she just started talking to me about how she wished she had done more. And this lady, if I'm not mistaken, I believe she told me she was 72, and she was just telling me how she wished she had done more. She wished she had taken the time to invest in herself more, and she honestly asked me, what made me get into the line of work that I got into. I didn't give her all the pieces, but I gave her just enough for her to see, where I was coming from concerning my growth. And it just worked out that we had a beautiful conversation, just speaking about how we as a human being often sell ourselves short. And this is not a dig at anybody in my family or people that I know have come across in my lifetime. But I began to think about a lot of the people that I have spent time with, and I have, you know, had um, instances where I'm listening to people talk, and I'm like, wow, this person has it. They have the drive, they have the knack, they have the know-how. They have the ability to move the needle, or their ideas are big and they don't belong in this space. Or, man, what made him stop? Why did he stop? What made her stop? What made her not want to continue to grow? And the main thing that I have heard was life got in the way, circumstances got in the way. We're not blind to that. I'm not blind to it, at least. I know life gets in the way, and we often, we have to put a stop sign. There's a stop sign in the road for a reason. You got to stop and you got to look all directions and ways and take in what's going on, because sometimes if you don't stop, you know you know the end result. If there's something else coming in the opposite direction, life does has a way of slowing us down as people. It does have a way of making us have to pivot. I've actually had to do a big pivot myself. Before coming to grad school, I had the opportunity to um, hang my hat somewhere else, and things didn't work out. So I had to pivot. I put all my eggs in that basket, and that's something I learned at the moment. Sometimes when we think things is a sure thing, it's not. And I basically, you know, I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina at one point. I had all my stuff settled. I had my place packed up, and just, we were just ready to go and move. And we had to end up, pivoting and not going in the direction that we needed to go and wanted to go. But the door's not closed on that opportunity. Hopefully soon, I'll be able to take, that trip and do what I need to do, and, go from there. And I'm just saying that because I want you to understand that I can relate, that in life we know things do happen, and sometimes we have to pivot, sometimes we have to put a pin in it, sometimes we can't follow through because we don't have the means at the time, or we don't have, or the opportunity that was presented is no longer feasible. And that was the conversation that I had with this older woman. She was just telling me how her life did not shape up and how she wanted it to, and we started talking about, patterns that we saw in our generations. My parents, late 60s, 70s, early 70s, and, undoubtedly, I don't know what they saw. I know my parents come from a generation, I know they don't like us calling us this, but they are part of the baby boomer generation. And that is a generation that I feel, they worked hard. They, the presence was there, but they were all about working. They couldn't stop. I come from a big family, so my parents have 9 kids. So I understood, now that they couldn't stop, and they had to continue to work, and they had to get and get and get, and they had to provide for their, 9 children. But I've had conversations with my mother, and one thing that I heard from my mother, along with this lady that I'm talking to at the agency that I'm at, is life got in the way. My mother shared with me a story that she actually was preparing to go into the army, but something happened and she had to pivot, and she could no longer go into the army. My mother was actually getting ready to go into the army, and she couldn't. So this is something that I wanted to share, not just her story a little, but again, the woman that I talked to. Things happen in life, and we often sit back as we age and we realize, I'm 40. I have not lived, deep into it. I have not, God willing, gotten to my 50s, 60s, 70s. I'm praying that I see 100 years old and older. But, I haven't um, seen what's to come, and I understand that. But to hear this lady in her 70s, to hear my mother, to hear my dad saying things, to hear other people I've been around saying, this happened, that happened, but I wish I would have went back. I wish I would have done it. I wish I could have did this. I wish I could have done that. That is something that made me pause, because I was in my mid 30s and I wanted more for myself. I knew what was up here within me, and I believed, that young girl. You can ask my family. I loved to draw at one point. I still have old sketches of houses that I drew that I wanted to build for myself. This is stuff I did as a child. My imagination and creativity is off the charts. I believe that's why I love to create, whether that's music. I love to cook sometimes. Cooking for me is therapeutic. Music for me is therapeutic. Drawing for me is therapeutic. These things, being able to be creative, is just something that I love to do. And I sat back and found some of my old sketches. I had them, and they old because some of the papers that I found were brown. And so, but I had them locked up in a previous storage in Raleigh, and I realized how my dreams of wanting to do things different in life early on when I got out of high school in Durham, they didn't shape out. But one thing I realized was I didn't um, get what I wanted in my 20s. I didn't get what I wanted in my early 30s. But here I am at 40, and I get an opportunity to break the cycle with myself. This is a conversations that I've had with my siblings. You know, I just had a conversation last night. My mother and father is six girls. We were all on FaceTime enjoying one another. It's all six, me, my five sisters, just enjoying each other, staying up to about close to pretty much midnight and just enjoying each other. And one thing that I began to think about is how all of my sisters on the call, you know, my twin, she was working hard, doing her thing at her job. I got some other sisters who are talking about going back to school to, you know, get the PhD. I got another sister who's in school. She's in the healthcare side, and she's going back trying to reach the highest level that she can get. I got another sister who's doing her thing in the real estate world, and I got another one of my sisters, the baby of my well, my youngest sister. She don't like us calling her the baby. She's, you know, walking into a new lane in Chapel Hill. So it's just, I was just elated to see that we broke the cycle, even though we didn't get to where we wanted to. Um, we keep going, we keep going, and that doesn't mean that, you know, don't sell yourself short. That doesn't mean stop. That doesn't mean don't do it. One of my old coworkers, he told me, and I'll never forget this. I was speaking to him about my apprehensions about crossing over into my new career, and he said, "Kawanda, I know it may sound scary, but he said, do it scared anyway." And I will never forget him for telling me that. That's, you know, that stuff still holds, and that stuff, it still rings with me. My old supervisor, she told me flat out, she said, put your big girl drawers on. I kid y'all not. Sometimes when I'm in my office and something seems like I cannot handle it, I kid you not, her voice still ring in my head now. And I just laugh because she said, put your big girl drawers on. And I tell myself, Wanda, put them on, keep going. So sometimes you don't know, you know, what people seeing you, and, you know, investing in yourself is very important, because sometimes that's all you need. You don't always need that push and encouragement, but sometimes you don't know how words from others can impact you to get better. And that's what I gathered from the lady. I'm tying it back around here in the setting that I'm in now in my agency. She said, young lady, I've noticed a difference in my granddaughter since she's been working along with you. And she said, whatever you're preparing to do and whatever it is that you will do in this line of work, you know, I wish you the best. And I wish I could have kept going. She said, I'm glad you didn't end up like me. And I don't know her at all. She said, you could have, she said, think about it. You could have ended up like me, you know, a woman in her 70s who wish she could go back to school, a woman in her 70s whose health is failing, you know, just telling me, you know, a lot of things that she was going through. And I told her, I said, ma'am, it's never too late. And she said, why would you say that? I said, because it's not. I was telling her about my classmate. I finished first in my graduating class. He finished second in our department, and he's 56, 57. I said, so it's never too late to change. It's never too late to start over. She said, baby, my mind is not the way it used to be. I said, ma'am, yes, you can do it. And I don't know what university that was that I saw, but it was an elderly gentleman who graduated and got his doctorates at 89. And I shared that story with her, and I'm mad because it's an HBCU, and I saw it on Instagram back in May. 89 years old and went back and got his doctorate. And I shared that story with her, and I hated that I couldn't pull it up because I wanted her to see it with her own two eyes. So, you know, sometimes we often think we hold ourselves back. If we're not careful, you know, you'll hold yourself back. You won't be able to thrive. You won't be able to grow because of you. It's not other people. I understand life does get in the way, but sometimes it's just us.